There's more to finding great wine values than looking for a needle in a haystack. Find out one trick that wine pros use all the time in this episode of Tuesday Night Wines. Hi, welcome to Tuesday Night Wines. I'm John Lenart. Tuesday Night Wines is about looking for great wine values. We're looking at wines between $25 and under. Usually we try and stay below $20, but sometimes we go up a couple extra bucks if there's really a special wine that warrants a few extra dollars. Tuesday Night Wines are wines that aren't meant to age. They're not precious. They're wines that you're going to buy, probably pop the cork that night. You may not even finish the bottle. You're going to have a glass, stuff the cork back in, maybe finish it off in a night or two, and they're going to be just fine. But most of all, Tuesday Night Wines are delicious. Now, in the past, we've talked about things like second label wines and expanding growing areas. But today, we're going to talk about something called declassified wines. What a declassified wine is a wine that's grown within a highly prized growing area or even a highly prized specific vineyard. And the winery grows these grapes, but for whatever reason decides it shouldn't go into that very special wine that they make there. Maybe the vines are still a little young and not producing the quality of grapes they're looking for to go into their great, Grand Cuvée or Grand Cru wine. Maybe a certain plot within the vineyard didn't express a certain terroir. Terroir, ooh. There's a big fancy wine word. What does that mean? Terroir is a term that wine people use, sometimes wine snobs use, like Marvin. And it's a term that means what the land in that specific spot brings to the grapes. So, for instance, if you're growing a certain grape on a very steep slope, and maybe that same grape in a very flat area, they're going to taste differently because of the area that they're grown in. So perhaps the terroir of a certain spot in the vineyard isn't being expressed in that vintage. So the winemaker decides not to use those grapes in that very special wine. So what does a winemaker do with these very special grapes from this very special place when they decide not to use them in their top wine? Well, sometimes they will put them into a second label wine. I've done a video about second label wines. I'll put a link to that below if you want to find out more about second label wines. Sometimes they'll create another wine with the same label but not express the specific vineyard. And lastly, what they might do is what's called declassify the wine. So let's say we have a wine that's grown in a very specific vineyard that could be called, well, we're going to go with tonight's wine. This wine could be called Barolo. It's grown in Barolo in northern Italy. It's grown in a Grand Cru vineyard of one of the finest winemakers in the Barolo area. In fact, this winemaker has received 100 points on a number of his wines from the vineyards that these grapes are grown in. But because they don't quite meet the very high criteria he demands to put into that Grand Cru wine, he makes this wine. So instead of calling it Barolo, he calls it Langhe. Langhe is the region that Barolo's in northern Italy. Before we go on, don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you want to find out more of my wine content as it comes out. It means a lot to me when you click that like button, and it's a little thing for you to do, so I'd really appreciate it if you click subscribe below. So Barolo, amazing wines, amazing growing area, one of the world's most expensive growing areas. And to get a wine like this from that region, it's unbelievable. This wine would stand up to a number of $50 wines from the same area if you were to put the name Barolo on it. However, they don't put Barolo on it. They would just call it Langhe Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is very much like Pinot Noir. It's very aromatic. It does an amazing job of expressing that terroir we talked about.
Oh, oui.
Yep, there's that wine snob word again. It expresses the land where it's grown very well, so you could tell one vineyard from another if you really have a high education in Nebbiolo. Well, let's give the wine a taste. First, a little smell. Wow, we got dried cherry. There's some leather. There's dried cranberry, violet notes. Little bit of like a cedar, like the inside of a cigar box. Yeah, this is really a pretty wine. Very aromatic. I can't wait to give it a taste. Wow, there's amazing complexity here. Again, complexity when we talk about wine means a combination of texture and flavors. It's not just one note. It's sort of all over. It gives you an amazing experience in the mouth. Again, we've got these flavors of dried cherry, dried cranberry, maybe a little bit of pomegranate there. Um, there's definitely that kind of leather. Uh, the floral notes are still there, but they're maybe play second fiddle to that beautiful fruit. Um, there's very high acidity, grippy tannins, but not overwhelmingly so. This is a wine that's medium bodied, but has a lot of everything else going on. It's not some giant wine. There's a real elegance to this rather inexpensive wine. So what is the wine? The wine is 2018 Vietti Langhi Nebbiolo Perbacco. So like we talked about, Langhi Nebbiolo is a wine that's sort of a regional wine. It's a wine that could come from anywhere in the Langhe region made from Nebbiolo grapes. However, this specific wine, Perbacco, is made from the Grand Cru vineyards, from the best vineyards in the region. And they're grapes that just didn't make the cut for the Grand Cru bottlings, but they make this unbelievable wine. Now, they call this wine Perbacco. And what is Perbacco? Well, Perbacco quite literally means like wow. Actually, I hear the root of the word means by Bacchus, like an explanation, like by Jove, or oh my goodness. When the winemaker Luca Corrado gave his mother a taste of this wine, she exclaimed, Perbacco, and that's why they call the wine Perbacco. So once again, this is a declassified Barolo. It doesn't say Barolo anywhere on the label. If it did, it would probably command a whole lot more money, probably upwards of $50. Boy, if you go into a good wine shop and find a Barolo under 30, $35 a bottle, you'd be hard challenged. And this wine will blow away Barolos in that $25 to $50 bottle range. This wine is well worth the money. Now, a little more than $20 a bottle. I paid $24 a bottle for this wine. That's a pretty easy price you could find, but so worth the extra couple bucks. This is a wine that gives you so much value for such a dynamic wine. Like all Italian wines, this wine's made to have with food. So make sure you have this wine with a meal. It'll stand up beautifully on its own, but with food, this wine will really shine. If you want to learn more about Vietti, listen to my podcast with Elena Corrado, the wife of Luca Corrado, Vietti's winemaker. I'll post a link to that podcast below. What value wine have you had that makes you say Perbacco? Leave a note in the comments below. Well, that'll be it for this episode of Tuesday Night Wines. Thanks for joining me. Cheers.